Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a nurse at the centre of an employment tribunal is facing a separate disciplinary from NHS Fife. Sandy Peggy is understood to be facing allegations of misconduct, patient safety failings and misgendering following incidents involving a transgender doctor. The dispute is also the subject of an employment tribunal which was adjourned on Friday. Also on tonight's programme. The mother of a baby girl who died in a Glasgow hospital tells an inquiry she's been through 8 years of hell since the death. BBC Radio Scotland presenter Janice Forsyth steps down after being diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's.
The owner has done nothing to make it into a facility which is benefiting anybody for over 8 years. We have a plan which we know we can carry through.
A small plot of land at the centre of a legal case over whether the Scottish Government can force the landowners to sell.
Coming up in the sport, we'll be live in Munich ahead of Celtic's Champions League showdown with Bayern Munich. But could the German side be without their star striker?
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. The lawyer for a nurse involved in an employment tribunal against NHS Fife says a separate disciplinary hearing set for later this week has been rescheduled at her client's request. Sandy Peggy is understood to be facing allegations of misconduct, patient safety failings and misgendering following incidents involving a transgender colleague, Dr Beth Upton. The dispute is also the subject of an employment tribunal which was adjourned on Friday until July. NHS Fife says no conduct hearing is scheduled imminently in this case. Stephen Gordon reports.
Sandy Peggy's employment tribunal was adjourned on Friday until July, 10 days not nearly enough to hear all the evidence. An A&E nurse at Kirkcaldy's Victoria Hospital, Miss Peggy claims that being made to share a female changing room with Dr Beth Upton, a transgender woman, amounted to harassment under the Equality Act.
The nurse's evidence was that during an exchange between the pair in the female changing room on Christmas Eve 2023, she told Dr Upton she was uncomfortable sharing the area with a man. Sandy Peggy denied referring to Dr Upton's chromosomes and a suggestion from the lawyer for NHS Fife and the doctor that it was the nurse's behaviour that amounted to harassment.
What's now emerged is that the day she gave that evidence, Sandy Peggy received a letter from NHS Fife asking her to attend a conduct hearing. The meeting, scheduled for this Friday, was set up to hear from the nurse and from witnesses, including Dr Upton, as senior health board managers consider allegations that have played a central role in the tribunal, all of which Sandy Peggy has denied. Nurse Peggy faces claims that her actions in the changing room on Christmas Eve amounted to misconduct, that she was responsible for patient care failings by refusing to communicate with Dr Upton on the ward, and that she misgendered her colleague by using he/him pronouns when talking to colleagues.
Once concluded, this process has a wide range of potential outcomes, from no case to answer to a nurse of 30 years being dismissed. The timetable, however, is shifting. This afternoon, NHS Fife said that while it couldn't comment in detail, no conduct hearing is scheduled imminently in this case. Sandy Peggy's lawyer, meanwhile, says Friday's hearing has been rescheduled at her client's request.
The employment tribunal won't sit again for months, but this case remains firmly in the public eye. Stephen Gordon, Reporting Scotland, Kirkcaldy.
Well, the story looks like it will become an issue in the political world this week as questions are raised with government ministers about it. Our political correspondent Lindsay Bewes is with us now. Lindsay, is this likely to be raised in Holyrood this week?
Well, Laura, the Scottish Conservative MSP Murdo Fraser had hoped to pursue this case here at Parliament with questions to the First Minister and the Health Secretary in the coming days. He's expressed disappointment this evening that his questions have not been selected. The Conservatives could still raise this issue later in the week with the First Minister. Now, Mr Fraser told the BBC today that he wanted the Scottish Government to intervene in this case and ask NHS Fife to reach a settlement with Sandy Peggy. He claims that she has been unfairly treated. The government says it won't comment on an ongoing employment tribunal. Now, in the past, the Conservatives have been highly critical of the Scottish Government's attempt to introduce gender self-ID reforms, a policy they claim became ingrained in the approach of public sector bodies when it came to issues like the provision of single-sex spaces. Now, the party perhaps seeing this case as an opportunity to challenge the government on what has become a politically difficult issue. The First Minister, John Swinney, he says it's up to individual organisations to ensure they meet their legal obligations on single-sex spaces, and that is set out in guidance. He could face further questions this week, though, on whether that guidance is clear enough.
OK, Lindsay Buse, Holyrood, thank you. The mother of a baby who died after catching an infection at a Glasgow hospital says she's been through 8 years of hell since. Teresa Smith has been giving evidence to the fatal accidents inquiry into the death of her daughter Sophia, who was 11 days old when she died at the Royal Hospital for Children in 2017. A warning: this report from Katrina Renton contains some distressing details.
Teresa and Matthew Smith's baby Sophia was just 11 days old when she died in April 2017 at the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow. They've come to the fatal accident inquiry looking for answers.
It has been a long road to get to this milestone that we have reached today. We are pleased that a fatal accident inquiry has been finally set up and hope that by the end of this process we will know the truth about our daughter and why her life was so tragically and heartbreakingly cut short.
Sophia was born at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. She had Down syndrome. Shortly after her birth, she was taken to the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow. Her mother said she was under no illusion Sophia was very ill, and she and her husband were told there was an issue with her heart.
In evidence, Sophia's mother, Teresa Smith, told the court Sophia was showing massive signs of improvement. Her dad, Matthew, said she fought like a wee Trojan. Mrs Smith said Sophia's deterioration on the 10th day came like a lightning strike. She said no one saw it coming. Of the staff, Mrs Smith said, "My impression at the time was they didn't have a clue what was going on. This was one-to-one care, and they did not see the rapid decline in this baby. How was that possible?"
Samples were analysed following Sophia's postmortem. They showed she had contracted MSSA, an aggressive form of MRSA, which is carried by people. The inquiry heard Mrs Smith was informed this could have played a role in her daughter's death.
Matthew Smith told the inquiry in a meeting with a doctor after Sophia died, he was told that it was bad luck that Sophia had contracted the infection. Mrs Smith said she asked the doctor if Sophia had not contracted the infection, what would her life have been like? She said the doctor said he would have expected Sophia to go on and live a very full life.
A fatal accident inquiry does not apportion blame, rather it asks questions to try and establish the facts of what happened, to ascertain whether a death was preventable and what lessons can be learned for the future.
At the end of her evidence, Teresa Smith said, "It has been 8 years of absolute hell. I want to know what happened to my baby. I want to know why she's not here playing with her brothers and sisters. I want to know why they acted so late. That absolutely putrid hospital caused the infection in my child, and when it killed her, it killed me too."
NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde are represented at the inquiry, and hospital staff are expected to give evidence. Sophia's mother said she hopes some good will come out of it so that Sophia's life will not have been in vain. Katrina Renton reporting Scotland at Glasgow Sheriff Court.
To some of the day's other stories now. And 2 mountaineers have been injured in the Cairngorms after being hit by the collapse of a snowfall bank. The pair were struck by the cornice in the Corrian Trecha area yesterday. Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team say they were assisted in the rescue by the Coast Guard helicopter from Inverness, as well as the RAF Valley Mountain Rescue Team from Wales, who were training in the area at the time. Changes to a controversial power line project between Peterhead and Bewley have been made by utility giant SSEN following public concerns. The company says the project is a vital part of upgrades to the transmission network across northern Scotland. BBC Radio Scotland presenter Janice Forsyth is stepping down after being diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. The broadcaster, who's 65, has worked for the BBC for more than 3 decades, presenting shows on BBC Radio Scotland, BBC Radio 4 and Radio 3. Well, our arts correspondent Pauline McLean is with us now, and this news comes as quite a shock, Pauline.
Absolutely, Laura. I mean, Janice is one of the most recognisable voices on radio, but she's also a familiar face at cultural events as a host and a presenter. She was the face of the BBC Authors Live season, so people will know her from that. And listeners to Radio Scotland will have noticed that she's been absent for the best part of a year now. According to the personal statement she released today, she has been experiencing deep feelings of anxiety since 2022 and finding some tasks, particularly things like navigation, extremely difficult. She had put it down to exhaustion. She'd also put it down to grief following the loss of her mother, but she's since had a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. Now, she said in the statement that although it's been a blow, it's also been a relief to finally have an explanation for what has been happening to her. And it's also fueled her decision to step back from social media while first telling everyone what's actually going on. And there's been a massive response on there to that news.
Yeah, she says she wants to continue to work where she still can.
She does. And, you know, she says that she has been able to continue to contribute to her podcast production company, The Big Light, which she co-founded 5 years ago. She said in the statement that the company is going from strength to strength and we're excited for more to come. She said, I'm not done yet. I suspect after years of seeking out music and literature and books and cinema for other people, she'll also be happy to have time just to enjoy those things for her own pleasure. But the other thing that this has meant today, Laura, is that sharing her statement publicly has also been commended by Alzheimer's charities, who are saying we wish her and her family very well and they thank her for raising awareness. I also recall 2 years ago when her brother, the sports broadcaster Janice Forsyth, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. She said how proud she was of him for being so frank and open in sharing his diagnosis. I suspect he and her family and all her friends will be equally proud of her today.
Yeah, I'm sure they are, and we wish her well. OK, thank you, Pauline. Now, it is a small plot of land in the Fife town of St Andrews, but it is at the heart of an almighty legal tug-of-war. The Scottish Government forced the landowner to sell it to a community group. Now, Forthy, which owns the land in St Andrews, is appealing that decision in court in the first case of its kind in Scotland. Ellen Beaton has the story.
Well, it's been an absolute rubbish dump for somewhere about since 2009.
David and his neighbours want to sort this plot out.
The owner has done nothing to make it into a facility which is benefiting anybody for over 8 years. We have a plan which we know we can carry through. We have the ability to do it. We have the finance to do it. And we feel it will be an enormous benefit, not only to our community, but to people who are interested in Mary Queen of Scots.
Although the group has plans to create a Mary Queen of Scots themed garden on the site, they don't actually own it. But Scottish ministers took the groundbreaking decision last year to force the landowner to sell it to the community group, the first time this has ever happened in Scotland.
If this is the first one, we want to see this setting a precedent. The Scottish Government said the same thing. In their decision to accept the application, they said that they wanted this to be set a precedent and encourage other communities to look at land and buildings around them that could also be used by them for further sustainable development. So it's a really exciting development.
The move is now being challenged by the landowner in a Dundee court. Lawyers claim the decision was unlawful.
I think for landowners it's really important to understand that your land isn't safe if you're not using it, or even if you're attempting to use it and you're not able to. You know, these applications can be made by third parties and the land can be taken off you by the Scottish Minister.
Lawyers acting for the Scottish Government said that the decision was taken with the information that was available at the time and in accordance with the law.
Both sides have now had a chance to have their arguments heard, and as the Sheriff noted here today, they are in legally uncharted territories. The community group, the landowner and the Scottish Government will now be anxiously awaiting a judgment.
Ellen Beaton, Reporting Scotland, Dundee.
Well, they are covering this story over on the news at 7 on the BBC Scotland channel shortly. Laura McKeever is here to tell us more. Who are you hearing from tonight, Laura?
We are hearing from both sides of this really interesting case for land reform legislation, Laura. So we'll have that. Also tonight, we're going to hear from some Edinburgh residents about a dome over some tennis courts that is causing, they say, some problems with their views and their sleeping as well, believe it or not.
Dear.
Finally, we'll be asking, could reintroducing wolves to the Highlands help save woodland? by culling deer. We'll speak to the academics who think that might be the case.
All the big questions.
7 o'clock, BBC Scotland Channel and iPlayer, Laura.
Good stuff. Thank you, Laura. Now, a shortage of qualified staff has led the Crown Office to take over the management of postmortem examinations in Aberdeen. Officials say the move is unprecedented and the step has been taken to minimise distress for bereaved families. Well, our reporter Louise Hosey has been following this story and joins us now from Aberdeen. Louise, what more can you tell us then?
Well, Laura, there hasn't been a full-time forensic pathologist based here in Aberdeen since 2022, and figures show that more than £100,000 was spent last year on bringing in locums. Now, the Crown Office says it is temporarily managing post-mortem services here in Aberdeen, and they say that this is to ensure that there is no gap in provision and also to minimise any distress to bereaved relatives. Now, it's understood that the average waiting time for post-mortem examinations is currently around a week. The situation has been raised by the North East MSP Douglas Lumsden. He says he's raised this with the Crown Office and he plans to raise it with the Scottish Health Secretary Neil Gray. He says it's causing delays for grieving families and that post-mortems need to be speedy and must be a priority.
So what have NHS Grampian and the Scottish Government been saying about it then?
Well, NHS Grampian have told us that there is a UK shortage of forensic pathologists and limited training places. They say they recognise the distress that this delays cause to families, but say that they are meeting their legal and contractual obligations. And they say that they hope the opening of a new mortuary in Aberdeen, scheduled for later this year, will help with future recruitment. It has, of course, been a difficult couple of months for this health board. Back in November, it declared a critical incident which saw some ambulances turned away from Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. Now, the Scottish Government says that appropriate cover is being delivered by locums, while NHS Grampian works to set up a forensic pathology service.
OK, Louise in Aberdeen, thank you. Now, it makes up almost a quarter of Scotland's entire workforce and is responsible for delivering everything from health services to education to emptying our bins. But public sector reform has long been called for to make it more efficient. Today, as the Scottish Government hosted a summit of councils and other key organisations. Well, our news correspondent Jamie McIver is outside where that event took place today. Jamie, will this lead to action then?
Well, the Scottish Government certainly hopes it will lead to action. Now, this event brought together some 150 people from a range of public sector organisations. For example, from councils, which are responsible for schools and other local services, and people from the NHS and other organisations. They were discussing how they might be able to work together more efficiently and effectively, perhaps sharing buildings and departments or simplifying processes. The Scottish Government is keen to see improvements, but they're also keen to stress that radical change, things like the privatisation of services, is not on the agenda here.
Bringing together those public sector leaders to focus on how we make services more efficient and more joined up, how we work more closely together, how we focus on prevention and how we deliver better services for people across Scotland. And it was absolutely not about reducing services or putting services out for privatisation. It was very much about making the public sector more efficient and more able to deliver.
And Jimmy, critics have claimed this is just a talking shop, is it?
Well, that's always the risk. One problem, for example, is that reforming any service often costs money to begin with, but any savings or benefits take a few years to become apparent. Now, in many ways, councils are a good example here because councils have certainly looked at sharing services over the years, but there's been far less of that than might have been expected 10 or 15 years ago. The council body COSLA says that short-term thinking can't be the driving force for change.
It highlights the need to perhaps take a long-term view on how we get to our goal, because at present I think we're all judged by short-term results. But if we want to move towards a system where prevention is saving us money and delivering better services in the long term, necessarily need a long-term view of it.
OK, Jamie, thank you. Well, let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis, and we're looking ahead to a big night of football for Celtic this week.
It's certainly a big one, Laura, and I'm sure the Celtic fans are starting to get excited and nervous.
Bit nervy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hello there. Well, Celtic boss Brendan Rodgers has urged his side to relish their underdog status as they look to book a place in the last 16 of the Champions League. They're in action against Bayern Munich tomorrow night, and our sports news correspondent Chris McLaughlin is there. Chris.
Hi Lewis, from a very, very chilly Munich, -4 here at the moment, and let me tell you, it feels it. Anyway, Celtic only arrived here actually in the last couple of hours. They were training at Celtic Park this morning. No fresh injury concerns for Brendan Rodgers. He says he has a full squad to choose from, and it's just as well. What a task they face here tomorrow night against Bayern Munich after that 2-1 win for the Germans at Celtic Park last weekend. Now, the Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers at his media conference today has been talking about how very few people give his side a chance.
I don't think there's any doubt that everyone will look at this game and us being the underdog in the game, and that's totally understandable. That doesn't change for us. We're still very mindful to be super competitive in the game, and as I said, we know that if we can play to our level, then it can make the game really difficult for Bayern.
Well, what about Bayern then, Chris? What sort of shape are they in after a big top-of-the-table clash at the weekend?
Yeah, they're in very good shape, as you can imagine. This is a bit of a fortress here at the Allianz behind me. A little bit of intrigue, though, Lewis, because Harry Kane, the England captain, was injured and taken off. He received a really sore elbow to the face against Bayer Leverkusen at the weekend. Now, his manager Vincent Kompany was asked by the media today, is he okay? He didn't train with Bayern Munich this morning. Vincent Kompany said, look, it's too early to tell, he should be okay, but didn't really commit. Then he was asked by a Scottish journalist, look, are you saying he's going to play? What's the deal? Should we see him? This was his answer.
Yeah, basically I blurred the lines on the question. I just threw up a smoke, or it was basically a smoke bomb what I said. But so I keep blurring the lines. We'll see tomorrow.
Yeah, Vincent Kompany there saying he's trying to throw up a smoke screen. I think that's what he meant. I would be very surprised, Lewis, if we don't see Harry Kane starting here tomorrow night. He's such a key player for Bayern Munich. Anyway, lots more to talk about tomorrow. Lots of Celtic fans arriving in the city over the next 24 hours. All the build-up tomorrow, as you would expect, against Bayern Munich, against Celtic in the Champions League.
Looking forward to it. Chris in Munich, thank you. Now, Motherwell's new manager, Michael Wimmer, here, has vowed to hit the ground running after being appointed as Stuart Kettlewell's successor. The Fir Park side announced the arrival of the 44-year-old German 3 weeks after Kettlewell left the club. Wimmer brings with him his long-term assistant, Amit Koch, while Stephen Frail, who had been interim boss, leaves the club. Now let's take a closer look at the new manager, shall we? He began his coaching career in the academy set up at Nuremberg before moving to Bundesliga side Augsburg as assistant manager in 2018. He was also number 2 at Stuttgart before being appointed interim boss in 2022. A few months later, he moved to Austria Vienna in his first permanent managerial role, leading the team to 5th place in his first 6 months. Here's a flavour of what Motherwell fans might expect to see from their new boss.
In terms of his playing style, I mean, if we maybe take Austria for a moment out of the picture, he coached, I think, 100 games under Pellegrino Matarazzo. So he served as the assistant coach under Pellegrino Matarazzo, the New Jersey born, now more German-based coach at Stuttgart. And there they played an intense style, something you would expect from German coaches, I think, these days. So high intensity, high press, getting downfield fast. So that's maybe something you can expect because he served as an assistant under Matarazzo for so many games.
And this is the challenge which faces Michael Vimmer. Motherwell are sitting 8th in the league, just 4 points above the relegation playoff spot, and with just 1 win and 11 in all competitions. So it has been a turbulent season for the fan-owned club. Rugby now, and Scotland coach Pete Horne says Finn Russell and Darcy Graham are progressing through concussion protocols and still in with a chance of playing against England on Saturday. Both players had to go off injured in the chastening defeat to Ireland at Murrayfield last time out, but have joined the squad on the warm weather training camp in Spain as they prepare for the Calcutta Cup clash at Twickenham. And Laura, there will be plenty more on the new Motherwell appointment over on the news at 7 very shortly.
Good stuff. We will see you there. Chris looked like he was freezing over there in Munich, but it has been pretty nippy here too, Christopher, hasn't it?
It has. However, there is some milder weather on the way by the end of this week into the teens.
No.
Yes.
I didn't expect that.
It's been grey though, hasn't it? Some lovely colourful houses there in Portree lifting the mood, but lots of cloud around. Good evening to you. Yes, we've had a lot of cloud across much of the country. A bit of sunshine here actually over the Caledonian Canal just outside Inverness. But big changes afoot this week. We've had high pressure influencing conditions for such a long time now. It's losing its grip. Low pressure takes over. That means weather fronts, that means rain, but also much milder air arriving from the southwest. Through this evening and overnight, a lot of cloud around, some showers in the northeast, wintry inland, and then a spell of rain, sleet and snow moving in through the early hours. Because of that, a Met Office yellow warning in force from 3 a.m. right through until midday tomorrow. But actually, we could see some snow almost anywhere really across the country overnight, away from the coasts. A few centimetres on ground above 500 metres, even to low levels, dusting in places. Windy around the west coast as well, and that's how we start the day tomorrow on a rather wintry note. Some freezing rain potentially as well, so treacherous conditions on untreated roads and surfaces. As we approach lunchtime, that morning rain, sleet and snow clears away, leaving us with a lot of cloud and once again quite chilly. So this is mid-afternoon tomorrow. Temperature-wise, 5 or 6 Celsius, still windy on the west coast, giving quite a wind chill. Still 1 or 2 spots of light rain or drizzle, some snow flurry still with us, still windy across the northeast. Peterhead up towards the Northern Isles with a few showers, and again still windy through the Minches there too. As we head in towards tomorrow evening, that cloud tends to melt away, some clear skies, a chilly night follows. That takes us through towards Wednesday. Some early brightness, then clouding over, some further rain pushing in. Again, a little bit of winteriness on the higher ground. And despite the winds coming in from the south, temperatures still restricted to around 6 or 7 Celsius for many. But beyond that, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, mild air on the way. We're scooping up really mild conditions from the southwest. You can see that quite clearly on the outlook there. Tuesday, Wednesday, 5-6 degrees. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, double digits and at times in places into the teens. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you, Christopher. And that is reporting Scotland. I'll have your late news around 10:30 tonight. Until then, enjoy your evening. Good night.